Hello, this is Stan Wisman. I'm here with my co-host, Rob Arrego, for another extra episode of Reimagining Cyber. Today, we're going to hit on a couple of different topics. The first, I'm going to hand over to Rob. He's going to share an event that he went to recently that had a lot of chief information security officers there speaking about innovation. And Rob, can you share some of the things that you picked up from that event?
Yes, Dan. So it was a really interesting event. As you mentioned, it was basically about 120 or so CISOs that were there. And I was able to lead a roundtable discussion and leveraged actually a survey report that we are coming out with at OpenTech Cybersecurity in conjunction with the Osterman Research Group. And the Osterman Research Group conducted this survey across about 250 CISOs globally, as well as CIOs, actually. And it was basically looking and delving into what their top cybersecurity investments are for this year. And what was interesting coming out of some of the findings in that report that I wanted to leverage for that roundtable discussion to get a lot of good kind of exchange amongst the different CISOs in the audience.
Yeah, affirmation that they are truly aligned with what the survey.
That's exactly right. Is it aligning to what you're seeing out there and what your initiatives are, right? There's a lot of great information in this survey report, but one of the kind of key elements that I really drove back into our discussion was the survey question, basically that drove into what are those areas that you're going to invest in, and they break it out into kind of categories of it's a high concern for the organization, it's also a high investment, but it's also again really a high priority for this year, right? So they kind of go through this syntax of low, medium, high, and each of those three can have a low, medium, or high element that comes out with an actual kind of sum. And I really honed in on the ones that came out with the three highs across the board, right? You're
sure.
A high concern, high investment, and it's a high priority. And so there's several in the list. I took the top five. And in the conversation flow, I gave them the context, here's exactly where this comes from in this survey, very recent. We just published it in conjunction again with Osterman Group. Let's go through it and want to see where everyone thinks, their world kind of sits in alignment with that or not, right? And so if I kind of walk you through really quickly the top five in order, right? The first one came in as securing the cloud with, different CSPs, right? We're seeing a lot of multi-cloud now. It could be anything that's cloud-oriented, so cloud data warehouses. So anything cloud-oriented, securing that environment, right? That was number one. Number two was dealing with ransomware. So how are you preparing and protecting against ransomware? And then how are you actually recovering in the event of
a topic we've covered several times.
Many times.
Yeah,
absolutely. The third was all around data. So how do you have a handle on what data you have, visibility to that data, right? The data discovery, classification, and also how you protect that data. The fourth was the application tier. How are we actually securing the applications, the code elements, APIs, anything involved with application itself. And then the fifth was all around how do you actually protect identities. Now, interesting enough, in the Osterman wording, it said, how do you protect user identities? And I kind of clarified that. I said, not just users, right? We could be talking about IoT devices. We could be talking about APIs.
Sure. So you needed to clarify that with them, right?
Absolutely. And everyone was like, yep, agreed. So as we kind of go through this, and I got to tell you, I really wasn't that surprised. The first one around securing cloud, not a single CISO raised their hand as that being their number one priority. So I asked, hey, let's go through the top five we just kind of laid out, and then we're going to talk about each. But first, let's get a raise of hands, right? Which one's number one for you on cloud security? Raise your hand. Not a single hand goes up. I said, okay.
Is that because they already have it under control?
It's different. So I said, if I asked you this question last year, would your hand go up then? No. If I asked you that 3 years, would it go? Yes. I said, well, why 3 years ago? Because we didn't really have a handle and understanding of what that was. And so we came down to is, and I kind of threw this out. I said, so if you look at these other areas around kind of, the data, the application tier, the identities, they're all the foundational elements that then translate into wherever it is, if it's on-prem or in the cloud. So is it much more that we're looking at those elements and they kind of allow you to be securing the cloud environment? And they all said yes, right? They're saying that
you have to worry about the hybrid situation now, exactly. And wherever that data resides, you have to secure it. or discover where it is, and that's what they're focused on.
That's what they're focused on. That's exactly right. So it wasn't that they say we're going to carve this thing out any longer and look at it that way. 3 years ago, we were still learning that, and that's why we probably would have raised our hand then, right? So then you go to ransomware, and this was really interesting. So how many, of you would raise your hand for that being your number priority? No one. And I said, really? Okay. Do you feel you've gone through the exercise of how you best prepare to protect your organization against ransomware, and to the level of working with your executives, so you're on the same page that when and if a ransomware event occurs, you have an idea of how you're going to deal with that? And majority put their hand up and said yes. And I said, okay, how many of you have said that you're going to actually just pay the ransom versus not pay the ransom? More hands went up to say we're going to pay the ransom than I expected.
Wow.
Which actually was,
and again, it sounds like they've done the tabletop exercises.
That's right.
They've actually, helped raise the awareness of the executives, and they know what they would do if there was an incident, a ransomware incident. And so that gives them at least the comfort that they don't have to have that as a high priority, as much as we have that understood, we can focus on other things.
It's exactly what it is. And you also take it to the level of, what type of business are you in? So one of the gentlemen said, hey, listen, we're a manufacturer. If our operational floor goes down, time is extremely money for us, and we can't deal with that. So our executives are saying, pay it. Another one shared with us actually, that they had dealt with a ransomware event. This was about 2 years ago, and they're in the healthcare vertical, and I believe in the area that they were operating, I want to say they have 8 hospitals as part of their system. 5 of them were already being impacted, so they made the decision: we're paying, we got to move on. And again, so it depends again on what is your business and what's your appetite. So everyone has their own decision to be made there. Now, what got really interesting is, as we started talking about the data piece, everyone was saying this is a piece that they're trying to really get their hands around because of privacy concerns, because of, again, this data flowing, whether it's on-prem or it's moved on to the environments in the cloud, and get a better handle on that. And also because of how data is being shared in even different business-to-business models. So that became very much a very high priority for the majority of the folks in the audience. As we then went into the application tier, this is one that seems to still be relatively kind of low in maturity, right? We had some people that were pretty well, hey, we've got a solid program. We're actually working really well with the development and testing teams. We got a pretty good handle on this. We continue to evolve. And others that are like, hey, we're just getting started, right? We don't know where to look. Everything's coming from so many different directions. So a lot of lessons learned. And that was a really good conversation for, enlightening others that needed the help. And again, just, others that might be further ahead in what they're looking at next. So that was,
I want to talk to that in a minute with what I want to share. So yeah,
yes,
that's good.
Yes, definitely. And then the 5th one was all around the identities I mentioned, right? So protecting the identities. And again, that could be a user, that could be API, that could be an IoT device, you name it.
Sure.
And that one again was one where the hands went up as another very high priority for them. And it was much more about, again, this whole shift that's happened over the last few years about really, as they kept on saying, hey, listen, identity is the new perimeter, identity is the new perimeter. Okay, we've all heard that, but still getting their kind of, capabilities in place the right way is what I would say. We had a lot of them saying, hey, we have elements of our identity access management programs in place. We have gaps in other areas that we're trying to figure out. We have some things that we may not still kind of want to move forward with. And then we have other people who have, hey, listen, we've done a lot of this stuff ourselves. It's homegrown, right? We've built the kind of integrations with Active Directory and other things to make it work.
A lot of custom development.
Yeah, it's all custom. And we can't do this any longer, right? We can no longer rely on that one person that actually created that for us and is operating and managing it for us.
And it doesn't scale necessarily.
It doesn't scale. It's a huge risk. What happens if they leave? What happens if, God forbid, something else happens to the person? And now what? So, looking at figuring out what they're going to do next from a commercially available kind of capability. So all in all, when I went back around and said, okay, now that we've had a discussion on these top 5 that the Osman Research Report came out with, let's go back and ask the question again. Where's your investment? We already kind of have the answers. We've been talking, right? We figured this out along the way. And again, no one raises their hand for the cloud. No one raises their hand for the ransomware, right? It's not even in the top 3.
So that didn't change.
Didn't change at all. Nothing changed, right? Even with the conversation, nothing changed. I would say that the data, the application, and the identity kind of elements were just about equal, maybe more on the data and a little on the app, and then the identity, I would say maybe in that order. But again, it was just a really good conversation to one, see kind of, hey, what's your perspective from what their survey findings were? How does that translate to you? But also an opportunity for all of us, right, to engage in that discussion and learn from one another on some different approaches that people are taking that are beneficial for them to be able to apply.
No, that's great. It's always nice to actually have that kind of engagement to see if the analyst reports or the surveys that we see and digest are aligned with what you're actually seeing in the field. And I had a similar kind of experience. We had another survey that we jointly did. This one was with dark reading,
right?
And it sort of pulls that thread of the application tier you were talking about earlier, but it's the State of Code Security, the AppSec Maturity Marathon that we co-sponsored. And so, this survey came out, and I also had an event this week, and it was focused on AppSec. And so I had a chance to sort of see if some of the top findings out of this survey that was reported by dark reading aligned with what I heard. So let me just go through some of these top findings. The first one is around DevSecOps, and I think it's also fair to say that it's interesting the way they did the survey. They did distinguish between large organizations and smaller organizations, and small being 5,000 or less, and that helps with some of the results here because, the question around are you implementing DevSecOps, 57% say yes, and that seems relatively low, but large organizations is up in the higher 60s. It's the smaller organizations that are struggling with DevSecOps implementations. There were a number of organizations that are still about to start. They're claiming they're going to be starting this next year. 30%, we're claiming they're going to be starting, whereas 14%, nope, we're not going to do it. And I think the other aspect of that distinction between large and small, a number of smaller organizations are still 60+% are doing manual code review and manual pen testing, which again, in this day and age where we've matured our tooling to a point where, it's accessible at a variety of different levels of cost and maturity. I was kind of surprised by that.
I would expect more, but even from covering kind of that topic within the CISO roundtable, it validates what you're seeing in the dark reading report.
And then the other area that was interesting to me was the fact that if you look at the area that they feel most vulnerable about, it's around APIs.
Yeah,
and not having a handle on that attack surface, not having the tooling they think that they need to identify, discover the APIs, to be able to do the vulnerability analysis. And again, larger organizations have a better handle on it than smaller organizations. And that was an area that, I've had some level of focus on, and I confirmed it in this session that I did this last week, that was an area of concern with those in the audience. And I think that's going to be something that in the next 3 years, we're going to continue to see as modern development continues to leverage APIs to the max. And are we truly securing that attack surface?
So Stan, on that, just out of curiosity, even from maybe the event that you participated in this week, so yes, API security kind of gets baked in a little bit into a more mature application security program, let's say. But do you feel that some organizations are maybe thinking or being sold on API security is kind of another way to even just kind of get started, and it gives you coverage across that really risk area that you just have zero visibility over at this point in time? Are they trying to position it that way, and are people buying into that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. When you say get started, what do you mean by that?
So if I'm an organization that is really just doing a lot of the basics, more manual process on going through and doing pen tests, doing some findings, and I really haven't gone into doing things around dynamic or static code analysis.
Could you just start with API security as far as where to focus?
Yeah, I think I see vendors that are kind of saying, hey, but if you start here, look at the coverage you're going to get, and you're off to a good start. Do you think that the organizations are seeing that because they're not starting?
I don't think so. I think it's just yet another area they need to focus on. And you could actually, like as we cover API vulnerability scanning in the context of SAST and DAST, and we can identify those weaknesses, and you can broaden your coverage basically, and include that when you're doing DAST and SAST scans. But as far as organizationally, I think it's sometimes a hot potato. It's like, who owns it?
Right.
Is this really in the scope of the InfoSec or AppSec team, or is this really something the developers should be focused on? Anyway, I thought it was interesting. Going back to your cloud comment, as far as the fact that the CISO didn't identify that as a hot area, there was a finding in this survey around some of the challenges of dealing with this hybrid environment, of the fact that you have on-prem development continuing, but also, as we know, a lot of development is now shifted over to the cloud, and the AppSec teams have to provide that tooling and that coverage in both environments. And that's a challenge as far as helping ensure that you get the integration that you need and to the dev tools, and be able to provide the results and the ways in which the developers expect them in both environments. And in many times it's dealing with multi-cloud, right? You may have organizations that are doing development in GCP as well as AWS and Azure.
Right.
And so that just adds to the challenge that the AppSec team has to try to cope with that very diverse environment.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, one of the things that we can do is also share out the 2 survey reports, right, that people can take a look at in more depth. The other thing I'll say is that there is a webinar coming up on the 18th of April. It'll also be recorded. People can replay it. Specific to the Osterman Research Report, I'll be actually speaking with Michael Sampson, who pulled it all together from Osterman Group, and I'll be sharing also, some of the feedback from that CISO roundtable, just to kind of have that as part of the discussion and see what his perspective is on that.
Just want to throw out there also, if our listeners want to opine on these surveys and make comments as to whether or not they agree with the findings or not, I'd love to have that kind of dialogue going with our listeners too. And we're going to go ahead and put links to the surveys in the show notes so you can get access to them.
Definitely. We always love to hear back from them as well. So hopefully these will be good resources. It's a good conversation for you to take away from today. We appreciate you listening in and look forward to having you on the next one. Take care.
Till next time, Rob.
Hello, I'm producer Ben, and just as Rob and Stan disappear into the cyber sunset, remember, you don't have to wait until next week to hear from them again, because we have a mountain of episodes for you to conquer. For example, episode 15 was called So You've Been Hacked, Now What? And featured Sean Toomer. He's a cybersecurity and data privacy attorney, and in his long career, he's focused on the litigation of cyber and privacy issues, proactive risk management, and incident response.
I view the CISO role as really one of the most important people in the organization. And I say that because cyber, in my view, is the biggest risk companies face today. Even COVID didn't shut down operations overnight in most cases. One ransomware attack, the CEO goes to bed tonight dreaming of profitability and numbers and vacations, and wakes up with a call from the CISO tomorrow morning going, we are now technically out of business unless we can recover.
That was from episode 15 of the Reimagining Cyber podcast, So You've Been Hacked, Now What? And I have a favour to ask of you. If Apple Podcasts is your listening platform of choice, then you can rate and review the show. Apple's mysterious algorithms love that kind of thing, and it helps others find Reimagining Cyber. And in general, wherever you listen, then do remember to subscribe, follow, share the podcast. You get the general idea. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.